The radical left's agendas are challenging American values, but conservatives like you haven't forgotten what this country was built on. My friends, the Heritage Foundation exists to make sure your voice is heard and to represent your values in the D.C. swamp. The Heritage Foundation stands for your values and won't give up the fight because they know you never will. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's Larry O'Connor sitting in for the great one, Mark Levin, for a special historic day right here in our nation's capital, Washington, the District of Columbia. And we need to talk about it. I'd love to hear from you throughout the evening at 877-381-3811. It was historic. I mean, listen, we're used to the eyes of the world being on Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, especially over the course of the last 200 days as the 47th President of the United States, who also happens to be the 45th, Donald Trump, has taken command of the executive branch of our federal government and has performed extraordinarily well. We are used to the eyes of the world being on Washington, D.C., but not quite like it's been for the last 200 plus days, and certainly nothing like what we saw today. As European leaders met in the White House, one after another, driving up the circular driveway to the White House, greeted by the president, the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the President of France, the Prime Minister of Italy, and ultimately Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. They were all here to help his nation peacefully resolve the conflict that resulted from Vladimir Putin's Russian tanks rolling across that border over 3 years ago because of the feckless, weak presidency of the Biden administration. The difference is stark and stunning, frankly, and what occurred today really cannot be overstated. We're closer than ever before to actually resolving this bloody disaster that has occurred in Eastern Europe, and we have much to discuss about what they're going to do, what might come of these conversations, but already it's been an achievement. I don't want to lose sight of the great work of the president's team, led by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who was extraordinarily magnificent yesterday in fending off the, frankly, ignorant attacks from the hosts of the Sunday programs here in Washington, D.C. These Sunday shows have run their course. There's no reason for them anymore. And I'm shocked they show up, the hosts, when they find out that Marco Rubio was going to be the guest. The attempts to undermine this White House, this presidency, this country, this nation, as the president attempts to do something that, frankly, is unheard of. To be able to negotiate this peace between these two warring factions where both sides seem completely intractable, immovable, impossible to budge from the positions that they were taking. And yes, a negotiation involves both sides walking away unhappy, unfulfilled, yet at peace. That's the goal here. And as the media in this city, in this nation, continues to root against the president, root against peace, root against the end of this bloody conflict, one must continue to ask, whose side are they, in fact, on? Because you see peace in Eastern Europe, an end of hostilities, an end to this war, under the circumstances that are currently and conditions that are currently being contemplated, would be an unequivocal, unadulterated, astounding victory for Donald John Trump. And that the media cannot stand. That the media must oppose. Oh, sure, we're all for peace. Oh, we'd love to end the bloodshed. We'd love to end the war. Great, great. But if it means Trump wins, include us out, says the mainstream media. And we are going to spend quite a bit of time this evening together, or this afternoon for all of our great West Coast listeners right now. We're going to spend quite a bit of time reflecting on the magnificent work that Marco Rubio did yesterday in fending off these feckless and, frankly, pointless attacks. But I would like to hear from you, 877-381-3811. Peace at what cost? It appears as though we have moved closer to this point where it looks like a cessation of hostilities could very well be imminent. And what it means is Ukraine is going to have to walk away with less territory they had before the Russian tanks rolled in. Now, at one point over the weekend, it sounded as though it would just be the Crimean Peninsula, you know, the territory that Russia took during the Obama administration. And Obama shrugged, yawned, flicked a little lint off the shoulder of his Armani suit, and moved on. Did nothing. There were no screams of Obama being Putin's puppet. This despite the fact that he was overheard on a high mic telling the president of Russia, before Putin took back command of the Kremlin, that he would have more flexibility after his reelection. He says he'd have more flexibility after his reelection, so just give me a minute. He gets reelected, and the next thing you know, Russia's rolling into Crimea. Obama does nothing, and the media was silent. Gee, it certainly looks like Obama's kind of Putin's puppet here, right? For a while over the weekend, it looked as though that might be the totality of it. Now it appears that the discussions involve a little bit more territory that Russia did, in fact, hostilely take under Joe Biden. And the two questions that everybody seems to need to contemplate now, and then not that it's our decision to make, by the way. Donald Trump is asking as the mediator here. He's acting as the mediator. It's like shuttle diplomacy, except they're all coming to him. He doesn't have to bounce from table to table, room to room in some sort of, bizarre setup in Brussels. They're all coming to Trump. And on Friday, it was in Alaska where Putin comes to Trump. And today it was in D.C. when all of Europe came to Trump. And the conditions appear to be that Ukraine loses some of its territory, and the European countries, with the support of the United States, extend to Ukraine what is tantamount to NATO Article 5 protections. They're not going to let Ukraine into NATO. That's not happening. But they're drawing a line now, and they're saying if Russia attacks you again, we will come down with full force. Which is very odd to me that, this whole time, the rationale behind arming Ukraine and giving them everything they wanted to drag out this war, while at the same time, by the way, Europe was giving them barely anything and buying gas and oil from Russia, enriching them so that they can continue to fund their war effort. Which that is now dried up, and it's part of the reason why you saw Putin hat in hand in Alaska on Friday. But it was always amazing to me that the rationale behind that effort, that we don't know we have to help Ukraine. This is an existential threat. We've got to help Ukraine. We've got to give Ukraine everything that they want. No questions asked. Blank check. As long as what would Biden always say? As long as it takes. It doesn't matter. Just as long as what kind of strategy is that? As long as it takes. What if it takes 30 years? Really? The reason that they utilized that rhetoric and the rationale behind it was, well, Ukraine may not be part of NATO, but Poland is. And Putin won't stop at Ukraine, and the tanks will roll into Poland, and then what will we do? Then we'll have to fight. And my response to that always was, okay, then we'll fight. But what's the point of saying we have to fight him now, because if we don't fight him now, we're going to have to fight him later? It's like, well, all right, then fight him now. But of course, you're not fighting him now. You're throwing Ukrainians up there to fight him now. And it ain't going well. And it always seemed like a nonsensical argument. And so now this makes more sense to me. This is like, hey, yeah, we're not going to put Ukraine in NATO. But if you mess with Ukraine from this point forward, it's like you're messing with us. All right? And do you accept those terms? Nobody, by the way, is talking about American troops being engaged, but we are talking about European troops, which makes a lot more sense too, by the way. And, oh, by the way, those European troops and ranks and budgets for national defense have now been upped to 5% of their GDP relatively soon, because President Trump has compelled the NATO countries to actually contribute more to the protection of their own borders and their own nations, rather than relying on the United States of American military to do all that work for them. So you see how everything's converging here. And, oh, by the way, America is compelled to make this happen as a result of the tariff peace negotiations that took place a couple of weeks ago with the European Union. You see how all the dominoes seem to line up here. Do you wonder why Putin wanted to have a conversation with Donald Trump after Trump makes his tariff deal with the EU, after Trump compels all the European nations to up their GDP spending to 5% of GDP for their military spending, after Trump sends a B-2 stealth bomber halfway around the world in a surprise attack against the Iranian nuclear facilities, blowing up their bunker? You saw that scene, right? It's amazing to me. We're going to play the audio where they're all angry that Putin got a red carpet. Putin got a red carpet. So what do they care what the color of the carpet was? What do they care? Oh, it's a red carpet. That's symbolism. Putin won on symbolism. Putin won on optics. Oh, really? You know, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't paying attention to the red carpet for the optics. What I paid attention to was Putin came over to the red carpet. He got a very forceful bear handshake from that hulk of a president representing our country, towering over Putin. And as they started walking down that red carpet, I assure you Putin didn't notice the color, because he was flinching in terror as a B-2 stealth bomber with 4 fighter jets accompanying it soared overhead. Looked like it blew his hair around. He flinched at it like a screeching bald eagle up there in Alaska was about to come down and grab him by the short hairs and carry him away back to the nest for the little eaglets. I assure you, Putin didn't care what color carpet he was on. In fact, when that B-2 bomber flew over, I think there may have been a little stain of yellow on the carpet as Putin was walking down it. And everyone in the world, including Vladimir Putin, knew exactly what the message was. Oh, yeah, you recognize that plane? Yeah, that we got a lot of those, Vlad. Yeah, you like it? I like it, too. I asked them to fly it just now. Last time I asked them to fly that bird, it flew halfway around the world, found a secret hidden bunker that was safe and was protected and was never going to be damaged in a million years, and we blasted it to Kingdom Come. Hey, Vlad, I bet you think you've got a safe bunker up there in the Kremlin, don't you? Do you think you have a safe bunker in the Kremlin, Vlad? Ah, that's amusing. Yeah, anyway, come here. Let's stand for a photo op. And they were angry that he was smiling. They were angry that Trump was smiling. He should have looked stern at him. You know, Obama gave Putin a stern look. And then he looked the other way while Crimea was invaded. But they were angry that Trump was smiling. See, it's a funny thing about diplomacy. Up until now, you know, Joe Biden, feckless, weak, no leadership. He allows Putin to roll his tanks in. People forget this, by the way. 6 months into Biden's presidency, June of 2021. Did you see any news coverage of this, by the way? You would think that when Donald Trump had his little face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, that the news packages that the cable and broadcast networks would put out would include, the last time a president of the United States met face-to-face with Vladimir Putin, it was June of 2021 in Geneva, when then President Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin. Why didn't you see many packages about that? I'll tell you why. Because 6 months after that meeting, Russian tanks were rolling across the border into Ukraine. Because it was an unmitigated disaster that resulted in the war. That was Joe Biden's presidency. And ever since that day, all you heard from Biden, all you heard from Democrats in this town, all you heard from some Republicans who really do get excited when there's a war going on, all you heard from the media, all you heard from the European nations was nothing but hyperbolic saber rattling. You heard, people used to make fun of George Bush for sounding like a cowboy. Yeah, I want Osama bin Laden dead or alive. Yeah, the difference was Osama bin Laden killed 3,000 Americans in a sneak terrorist attack that sent the World Trade Center down into ashes, and they attempted to go after the White House, and thousands of Americans were dead. And yeah, I want a little cowboy then. But instead, Biden tried to be the cowboy. Biden did the little snake eyes. Biden said, no, we're the total regime change. What were the conditions for the end of the war? Russia withdraw all territory, including Crimea, and regime change, Putin no longer president. That was never going to happen, and everybody knows it. And that's all you heard from all of those people. And now suddenly you've got a different tone. And that is what diplomacy is. I don't like Putin. I think he's a thug. I think he's a criminal. I think he's an authoritarian dictator. But if you really want to have peace, guess what? That means sometimes you got to stand next to a thug and smile. And that's why today was so important. And I'll explain a little further in a minute. And I do want to hear from you. Are you okay with what you're hearing right now as this move, apparently towards peace, is solidifying? 877-381-3811. I'm Larry O'Connor. It's the Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
Folks, we're less than a year from the 250th birthday of our great nation. But sadly, far too many have forgotten what this country stands for. Why? Because they forgot or were never even taught how this country was founded, why it was founded, and who founded it. If we lose our heritage, we lose America. That's why the Heritage Foundation needs your help. They've created a resource not just to ensure that patriots like you don't forget about the American founding, but to equip Americans with the facts they've never learned in school. This resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores the question of why it's so important to study the American founding and why the founding still matters today. Folks, don't wait. Get your free copy of this essay today at heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN. Now, included in this resource is a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. You need to read it, folks, and so does everyone you know. So go to heritage.org/LEVIN now. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
I'm Larry O'Connor in for the great one, Mark Levin. Thanks for listening today as we reflect on a historic day. I've got a lot of audio from the Oval Office and from this meeting with European leaders. I've got some audio of the president and Zelensky answering questions. And as I mentioned a little later, we're going to give a bit of a tribute to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I do want to you to hear Zelensky. Peter Doocy, Little Deuce, they like to call him over there at Fox News, asked Zelensky a very specific question. You don't get a specific answer, but the answer is telling. Ask if he was prepared to continue to fight or if he is willing to redraw maps. Take a listen to his answer.
We need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support, American and European partners. We will do our best for this. I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war. And we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
All right. What he said, if you didn't hear through the accent, was he didn't say anything about the maps. He didn't say anything about territory, which I think was telling. See, Zelensky 6 months ago would have said, we won't budge an inch. We want all of our territory back. We're proud. And I understand that. By the way, I understand that. I would want my president to say that about my country if my country was invaded. He didn't say that, though. What he said was, we need to stop the war. We need to stop Russia. And I support the idea of President Trump to stop the war, which means he's on board with Trump's approach here. And he said we need to make diplomatic talks and trilateral talks. So that's a step in the right direction. Also a step in the right direction, he was wearing a suit. Oh, he looked like an Eastern European mobster, but he was wearing a suit. More on today's historic day in Washington and a move toward peace in a moment.
How many founding fathers can you name? I'd bet most Americans can't name more than 2 or 3. Folks, if we forget the founding our country's heritage, we risk losing our America as we know it. The Heritage Foundation needs your help, ensuring that the American founding and those who made it possible aren't forgotten. Their new resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores why the American founding still matters in the 21st century and why it's so important that we study it. Without the unique principles that form the basis of our founding documents, the challenges of self-government, and the dedication of our founding fathers, America as we know it could never have existed. So go to heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin. Get your copy of this important new essay from the Heritage Foundation, which includes a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. There's too much at stake to not take action today, so please get your free copy at heritage.org/Levin today. That's heritage.org/Levin.
It's your daily adult dosage of the Constitution. The Mark Levin Show. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
Larry O'Connor sitting in for Mark Levin. I do the morning radio show in Washington, D.C. on Mark's home station, WMAL, along with my co-hosts Julie Gunlock and Patrice Onwuka, two shining stars from Independent Women's Forum. Check out our morning show every day. It's 5 to 9 Eastern. You can catch it live. You can grab the podcast. Also, by the way, I started with Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart's the person who brought me into this world about 15 years ago. I share with him a disdain for the way our corporate legacy media does their job. They're liars. They're propagandists. And I wrote a book about it. It's called Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant, because the media is broken now forever. We're going to talk about MSNBC. Trump has defeated MSNBC now. He defeated Biden. He defeated Kamala Harris. He defeated George Stephanopoulos. He defeated CBS News 60 Minutes. He's now defeated all of MSNBC. They've had to rebrand. I assure you, if you're a successful news organization and you're winning and you're telling the truth and you want people to trust your brand, you don't change your name. That doesn't happen. I promise you. He keeps winning, and I write about it in my book and how he won. And it also chronicles all the lies the media told in the 2024 presidential election, hiding Biden's health, making it seem like Kamala Harris was coherent, stuff like that. And I break it down and give you a historical perspective on all that stuff and the First Amendment. And huge kudos to Mark Levin for inspiring me in much of the book. He gave me a blurb on my book as well. So check it out. It's Shameless Liars, and you can get it at Amazon, hardcover, paperback, or audiobook. Speaking of books, Mark Levin, #1 New York Times bestseller, On Power. I know you've bought that book. If you haven't, buy it. In fact, I'll tell you, when I just interviewed Mark last week about the book for a second time. I love his book, and I have read it twice. It is a very easy read. If you don't have a book this summer yet to read by the pool or the beach or whatever holiday you're going on, get Mark Levin's On Power. Get it now. And it's back to school time. If you've got kids in your life, and I mean high school kids or kids that are going off to college, or maybe they've already done a year in college and they're starting to say stuff around the Thanksgiving table that are making you look sideways at them, your grandkids, right? They're saying, "What are you starting to dive into the Marxist swimming pool there? Because the water's dirty and it's shallow." If you've got a teenager or young adult in your life and you're concerned that they're not getting a real education, get them a copy of Mark Levin's book. Really, you should get them a copy of all of Mark Levin's books. But On Power is a great digestible read about everything going on in our country today. Do that, please. All right, let's start with Peter in Hillsborough. I got more on today's events, and I want you to hear more from these world leaders, but I also want to hear from you. So let's go to Peter in Hillsborough, New Jersey. Peter, thanks for calling in. You're on the Mark Levin Show.
Larry, thank you. All right, so first point, lately and really most recently, the events that Donald Trump has been putting together and creating and being successful at gives me an exponential amount of extra confidence that he's not only doing the right thing, but we will eventually succeed again as the greatest country in the world. What I'm more concerned about, and I'm not sure how to think this through, is he's only going to be president for 3.5 more years. Who is going to replace him to do the same kick-butt job that he's doing right now? That's my main concern. I'm looking long-term. Once he's gone, we've got to get another renegade like him. And there's my point. So thank you.
Well, listen, let me engage with you on it, Peter. You know the bench. You know who's waiting in the wings. I mean, obviously, J.D. Vance is the vice president. He's amassing a lot of political clout right now, and he's the person that Donald Trump personally chose to step in for him if, God forbid, he can't finish up that 3.5 years. You've got Marco Rubio. There's a lot of, you've got Ron DeSantis. You've got Glenn Youngkin. The Republican bench is deep of the people, and certainly people that I did not name. Peter, who do you think could do this?
There's my. I'm not so astute that I can say. People talk the talk, but Donald Trump is walking the walk.
Yeah.
So I trust Rubio. I trust Vance. I love guys like Kennedy from Tennessee, but we need those types of people to come in and keep bulldozing. And I'm not exactly sure over the slightly mid to long term that I can identify. I'm not scared.
No, I hear you,
who's
Peter.
going to be there.
Listen, I hear you, and I appreciate your honesty. Most people, call into a show like Mark Levin's and they act like know-it-alls, and you're actually like, yeah, I'm not sure. I get that. I really do, and I appreciate the call. Thank you, Peter, in Hillsborough, New Jersey. Let me just say this. Interesting. First of all, I understand the whole, it's a uniparty. I get that. And you're right. There are some Republicans that I trust less than I trust certain Democrats. But let me just say, based on the national names that I'm hearing right now as potential nominees for president for the Democrats, any Republican is better than a Gavin Newsom or a Tim Walz or a Pete Buttigieg or a Wes Moore or a Gretchen Whitmer or, God forbid, a Kamala Harris again. All right. So you're really afraid. You're really scared. Be scared of that. All right. Number one. Number two, the fact that Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and other members, I think Sean Duffy's doing a great job. Listen, this is a stacked cabinet right now. And the fact that Donald Trump personally handpicked each and every one of them to fill the role that they're filling right now should lend us some credibility for those cabinet members and officials within this administration. There's another thing, though, that I want to point out. It's a funny thing about leadership. You just heard Peter say, a lot of people walk the walk. Excuse me. A lot of people talk the talk, but then they don't show up. I've seen that a lot in my lifetime. A lot. How many Republicans have run for office promising to shut down the border and get tough on crime and get tough on immigration, and then they get into office and nothing happens? How many of them promise that we're going to drill in Anwar up in Alaska again. Screw those environmentalists. Yeah, no, to hell with the climate change thing. I don't care. We're going to grow in Anwar. And then they don't. How many of them run for office and say, yeah, we're going to defund PBS. To hell with NPR, and that's crazy, and there's no reason why we should be spending that money at all anyway. We can't afford it, and their propagandists, no, I'm done with them. We're going to defund it. And then they never do it. Right? How many times do they run for office saying they're going to do that? Oh, I hate abortion. I hate abortion. Abortion is evil. I'm going to nominate the greatest Supreme Court justice you're ever going to see. And then you get David Souter, right? And although real fast, I was just thinking about this the other day because I always point that out. It's like, George H.W. Bush gave us David Souter. Let me just pause on for a second there. Rest his soul, George Bush, the elder. He did. I always use that as sort of a punching bag that, he promised he was pro-life and he gave us David Souter. He also gave us Clarence Thomas. And I really, we shouldn't forget that. And I don't do the man justice. Honestly, quite possibly the greatest legacy of the 41st president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, who only had the one term. And I know he was a challenging guy. And I know that a lot of people, I was an admirer of his in many respects. I was also incredibly frustrated with him in many respects. But God bless the man. If his presidency amounts to one move, well, two moves, nominating Clarence Thomas and then standing by Clarence Thomas when the going got tough. Because think of what our country would be like right now if we did not have that great man sitting on that bench now as the longest serving Supreme Court justice of our time. So I just, but the point is made. We've heard these promises. We always hear these, there are still people in this town, the, Jonah Goldberg types and the Bill Kristol types. He said, Trump isn't even a conservative. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about these issues. He doesn't care about these values or principles. He's just got an ego. He just says what he has to say to keep it. And my response as a conservative who cares about these issues is, I don't care. So what? Who would you rather have? A principled, solid, perfect, doctrinaire, to the letter conservative who can't get anything done, or a guy who I'm told doesn't really have any values? He's just a narcissist. He's just an egomaniac, but he just says what you want to hear so that he can retain power, but actually does the things you want him to do. I'm sorry. Politics, y'all want to think of every president as the second coming of Washington, Lincoln, or Reagan, and I do too. I love living in that world. I love thinking to myself that the guy who ends up sitting in the Oval Office is somehow going to be, receive some sort of special anointing from the Holy Spirit, and suddenly he's going to be this transcendent figure. But it's really rare. They've been few and far between. And the fact of the matter is, the moment conservative voters in America recognize that politics is actually a transactional business. They always say it's the second oldest profession, but it has a lot in common with the oldest profession because it is transactional. They get something out of it, you get something out of it. And listen, if the guy is a saint and a Boy Scout, and you can tell your kids to look up to him and admire him and everything about him and everything he says and everything he tweets and everything he wears and every joke he tells is also pristine and perfect and wonderful and admirable, great. That's, you're playing with, house money at that point. But it's such a solid point to say these guys all talk the talk, but then when they get into the position, they don't get it done. I'm not as interested in them talking the talk. Just walk. And he's walking pretty good and has walked pretty good. And that's good enough for me. And one other quick thing I'll say about the Republican bench, and then we'll get to more today about what happened today. When you talk about these other guys, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and Sean Duffy and Ron DeSantis and Glenn Youngkin, and looking at the Senate, there's some great senators that are emerging as well. And Republicans have who do the Democrats have? Buttigieg, right? Newsom. Good God. Tim Walz. Are you kidding me? We have giants, right, compared to the other side. And you never really know until they're given that job. You never really know how they're going to fill that space, how they're going to rise to the occasion. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was very skeptical of Marco Rubio becoming the Secretary of State. I was hopeful. And ultimately, I said, well, listen, Trump knows the measure of the man. He's worked with him. He's met him. God knows he's known him ever since the primaries in 2015. They didn't get along very well. If Trump thinks that Rubio's the guy for state, let's see what happens. And am I the only one who has been absolutely shocked and delighted that Rubio has risen to this job, has risen to the occasion, and far surpassed any expectation? And that's my point. It's like, nobody can envision, okay, who's going to replace Trump in 3.5 years? And I can't believe I'm even falling into the trap of worrying about the next presidential election. For God's sake, we're not even a year since the last presidential election. But if that's something you're concerned about, just recognize, of all those, you never really know. I remember when Ron DeSantis was a congressman in Florida, and yeah, he was fine. And he decided to run for president. I was like, really? Okay, well, we'll see. And he won. And I think he rose to the occasion. I think he filled out that space very well. Can he move on to the next step? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But you don't know until they're in that role, until they're in that position. And I got to say, both Vance and Rubio and Duffy at Transportation, Kennedy at HHS, Bessent. What about Bessent at Treasury? We didn't know anything about that guy, right? A couple of people in the business world did. Did you think he would fill this role as well as he did? By the way, one of the reasons why all these guys are doing so well, and women too, by the way, I should say, Christine Noem's doing a great job at DHS. How do you know one of the reasons why they've been able to fill out so well, why they've been able to rise to the occasion? Leadership. They're given guidance. They're given direction. They're given a mandate. They're told what to do. They're told to play to their strengths. They've given some freedom, some latitude, but they've all been told, no, but you work for the president, and this is your focus, and this is the agenda, and they step up, and they've been bringing it. So I would not be so worried. There's a lot of game to be played between now and 2028. And you just keep your eye on President Trump. One thing, when you're a CEO and you're a businessman and you're successful because you find the right people and you bring them along. Sometimes even you bring along the person who's going to replace you so you can move on to your next gig. So keep an eye on that. More to come. I'm Larry O'Connor. It's the Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
Folks, we're less than a year from the 250th birthday of our great nation. But sadly, far too many have forgotten what this country stands for. Why? Because they forgot or were never even taught how this country was founded, why it was founded, and who founded it. If we lose our heritage, we lose America. That's why the Heritage Foundation needs your help. They've created a resource not just to ensure that patriots like you don't forget about the American founding, but to equip Americans with the facts they've never learned in school. This resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores the question of why it's so important to study the American founding and why the founding still matters today. Folks, don't wait. Get your free copy of this essay today at heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN. Now, included in this resource is a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. You need to read it, folks, and so does everyone you know. So go to heritage.org/LEVIN now. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Leaders from Scandinavia, Germany, Italy, France, UK, all sitting in the table, a historic scene. You got to see it to believe it. It really is something. President Trump leading the meeting and delivered some prepared remarks.
Essentially, I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is, you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can.
Yeah, moving toward a trilateral meeting, which a lot of people going into today thought would not happen. Zelensky, Putin, and Trump, the three of them working out this deal. And he wants this deal, but he's also clear-eyed about it. And he's clear-eyed with who he's dealing with. I don't want to finish a thought that I began on the last segment, having to do specifically with Putin on Friday. We're going to talk about that scene and what the media did to try to distort it. The red carpet, and how Marco Rubio handled it. But let's just be clear here. We had 3 years since those tanks rolled across the border into Ukraine. We had 3 years of blood, and we had 3 years of massacres and children dying. And did you know that since November of 22, the territory gained by Russia has been less than 1% of Ukraine's landmass? There's been no movement. This has been a stalemate since November of 22, just a few months into this thing. And it was like, well, then why couldn't they make a deal? Why couldn't they make a deal? Because the rhetoric from the Europeans, led on by Joe Biden, with the saber rattling, was like, Putin's Hitler, Putin's Hitler. You know, people need to understand. When a Russian leader is called Hitler, they take that kind of seriously. They don't like it. See, over here, Republicans are used to it. We've been called Hitler since, Reagan. Okay? That doesn't have the impact. Putin, a Russian leader, you call him Hitler, he's going to take offense to that. Kind of ticked him off. Trump took a different approach. It's known as diplomacy. You need to be able to be the guy who can go and stand on the tarmac with Putin and let a bomber scare the hell out of him. And then 3 days later, have a meeting in the White House with all of Europe and be effective in both meetings. Biden couldn't do that. More coming up.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's Larry O'Connor sitting in for Mark Levin. I am the morning radio host on WMAL in Washington, D.C. From 5 to 9 every morning. That's right. I've been up since about 4 a.m. Eastern time, and I'm fine with that. It's the life I've chosen, but it's good stuff. I enjoy doing the morning show in Washington, D.C., of course, especially on days like this when all eyes of the planet are on us and something extraordinary is happening. Did you see the image of these world leaders all rolling up one limo at a time in front of the White House? Zelensky gets out wearing his black mobster Eastern European call me Boris suit. It is a suit, though. I got to give him that. It wasn't a T-shirt. And, of course, Trump towers over this guy. He's like, he almost looks twice his height sometimes. And he shakes his head and he goes, oh, look at you. He said, look at you with a suit. Look at you. Look at a collar and everything. Did you put on a collar? Good for you. It wasn't quite that infantilizing, but it was pretty close. It was brilliant. And I have to say, Volodymyr was on his best behavior. Trump is not happy with either of these guys, which brings me back to the point I was making in the last hour. And if you missed it, too bad. But one of the points I was making is, everybody talks about diplomacy and peacekeeping and peacemaking. And it's like, and I thought Henry Kissinger was fine. But Kissinger is a great example. You got to talk to the bad guys. If you want to be, it's great to talk about being a diplomat. Oh, Joe Biden was such a national security expert. He was so great at foreign affairs. He was wrong about everything all the time. And when he was president, he put himself in a position where he was like playing president. He was acting more like Hunter Biden than Joe Biden half of the time. And it was always this squinty-eyed, Putin's a thug. Putin's authoritarian. He's a totalitarian. And if you could hear him through his slurred words, it's like, this kind of aggression will not stand. And listen, if they did it to our country, I would understand that. And I would take the same stance, right? But if the world really is looking at the United States to be some sort of, trilateral sort of impartial or, yes, we have a vested interest, but we have a main focus on ending this conflict and bringing about peace. If we're really supposed to take that role, then how in the hell do you spend your entire time calling one guy, Vladimir Zelensky, the freaking combination of Winston Churchill and Mother Teresa, when everybody knows he's not? And this war is our war. Not 1 inch should we give. We will fight this as long as it takes to put down this aggression. And we must have regime change in Moscow. And it's like all of this screaming. If you're Vladimir Putin, why in the hell are you picking up the phone when Biden calls? Or if Antony Blinken calls, or Jake Sullivan, or whoever the hell was working with Biden? Even if they tried to make the phone call, it wasn't going to happen. It was like, oh, Trump's cozying up to Putin. He stood on a red carpet and smiled with him and shook his hands. And everyone talked about how Putin was playing to Trump's ego. To hell with that. Trump was playing to Putin's ego. Everyone's like, oh, Trump gave Putin so much. I don't disagree. Trump did give Putin something that he wanted. Let me ask you something. What did he give him? He gave him a photo op. He gave him a photo op and he didn't arrest him I heard some people were saying, he should arrest him. He's a war criminal. How dare they put out a red carpet for a war criminal? So he let him fly to a military base, just 100 miles from his border in Russia. By the way, everyone owes Sarah Palin a big apology. Did you see the media people over the weekend saying, by the way, if you didn't know, Alaska is right next door to Russia. They're very close. They can actually see the landmass from certain parts of Alaska. And I'm screaming back at the television, you made fun of Sarah Palin when she said that. So what did he give Putin? He cracked the door open an inch for Putin to save face. And somehow, it was not that long ago when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were acting like Putin was, their best friend. Right? Remember? Putin liked that. Putin likes to be on the world stage. Putin wants to go to the G8 summits or the G10 summits or whatever the hell they want. He likes to pretend that he's, running a real country there, even though, in kind of an oligarchy with a handful of very rich, corrupt businessmen, pretty much in arms dealing, gas and oil. And Trump, over the last 7 months, has shut off the spigot. He has reoriented the world's sights to America and the Middle East as the leading supplier of gas and oil. He's convinced the EU to stop buying gas and oil from Russia. All the while Europe is screaming at us that we need to be spending more money on Ukraine's war effort, while they were handing money, hand over fist, to Vladimir Putin in exchange for oil and gas, funding his war effort. So it was incumbent on us to spend our tax dollars to build up Ukraine's military to fight against Russia's military that Europe was financing through their purchases of gas and oil. Someone make sense of that to me. And yet, yes, Biden's a genius in foreign policy because that's the scheme he engineered and didn't say boo about. So for 3 years, Biden and the American diplomatic team and Europe are all making Zelenskyy out to be Mother Teresa, Winston Churchill, and George Clooney combined. And meanwhile, Putin's Hitler. It's a funny thing. American Republicans were used to being called Hitler, but you call a Russian leader Hitler, they take it personally. They think that that's an insult. So Putin gets angry and angry. He doesn't want to play ball. He doesn't want to do a damn thing. Trump gets in there, shuts off the spigot for cash for his gas and oil. We start drilling gas and oil. We start bringing the price of gas and oil globally down. We made better deals in the Middle East. Remember, Trump's first major visit was to the Middle East, striking deal after deal after deal. We get foreign investments coming to this country. He makes a trade deal with the EU after threatening the tariffs. And suddenly we're playing ball with EU, and they're buying gas and oil from us, and they're also doing more financial arrangements with us. Russia's isolated. Russia's secluded. Russia's done. And then Trump starts threatening more and more and more draconian sanctions against Russia to squeeze them even more. And then when Russia makes an overture to Rubio or to Trump through Witkoff, and Witkoff comes back and says, Putin would like to meet with you. And Trump says, well, what does he want? He says he wants the photo op. He doesn't want to be treated like Hitler. He doesn't want to be treated like a monster or a pariah. And Trump's like, well, I don't trust him. I don't like him. And it's like, you don't have to. Go and have a meeting. And then 3 days later, he has a meeting with all these European leaders. Putin in Alaska says none of this would be happening if it weren't for Trump. And he said some other things that I'll get to later. And then today, all the European leaders say, yeah, that none of this would have happened without Trump. And now suddenly they're talking about trilateral meetings. And all these people who were criticizing Trump for standing next to Putin and smiling and shaking his hand on a red carpet when nothing tangible actually was given to Putin. And it never occurred to any of them that this is what diplomacy looks like. Diplomacy, forgive me, means sometimes you have to stand next to a monster if you want to get something done. And that's what he did. And you tell me what world leader would be able to have a happy handshake and photo op with Putin on a Friday and then have all of Western Europe come to your house in D.C. on Monday and praise you for your efforts in bringing about peace. You tell me what world leader can do that today. Is there anyone on the planet? Could Biden do it? I got one for you. Could Obama have done it? Thank you. And we know Hillary and Kamala couldn't have done it. And so now we're on the brink of this thing. And again, I don't pretend to know everything that's happening. And as you watch cable news tonight and you start hearing experts predicting what's going to happen and tell you how this is going to play out, they're lying to you. They don't know. They're as confident as to how this is going to end up as they were that Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016 and that Tim Walz was going to make a great vice president. That's how accurate they are. They have no idea. They have no idea. But cable news will keep putting them out there as the experts. They'll keep putting, oh, what do you think is going to happen? If the media could just spend a little bit of time telling us what just happened and why it's important, and analyzing the reality of what happened today, instead of predicting and projecting and anticipating and lying about what did happen, they gain a little bit more credibility. Which brings us to today's look back to yesterday. Marco Rubio, your Secretary of State, it turned out, because of the luck of the draw, that it was nothing but women hosting the Sunday shows. You usually have Kristen Welker on Meet the Press. You got that lamentable Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation. And this week you had Martha Raddatz, who was filling in for George Snuffleupagus on this week. So all three women tried to play the gotcha game with Marco Rubio, and Rubio was having none of it. We'll start with Kristen Welker, Meet the Press.
I want to play something you said about President Putin. This was right after the invasion in March of 2022. Take a look.
This guy lies, habitually lies. He's never kept a deal he's ever signed, and he lies all the time. And I don't know why, but he plays us like a violin in the West, because the West wants to believe that you can cut a deal with everybody. You can't cut a deal with guys like this. He's a professional, experienced liar.
Mr. Secretary, given that, what makes you think that if you are able to reach a deal with President Putin, that he would stick to it, based on, as you just said, he's a liar?
Well, that's the point. That's why the deal has to have enforceable mechanisms in it. That's why the deal has to have things like security guarantees. That's the point I was making a few minutes ago when you were asking me about looking someone in the eye. What's important here is actions, not words, not paper, document. Those are all important. Those are elements of a deal, but they have to be enforceable. They have to be verifiable. They have to be enduring. There's no point here in signing a deal that's going to be violated in 3 or 4 months. There's no point in doing that. It actually would make things worse. So that's why this is such a difficult thing. Not only do you need a deal, you need a deal that's verifiable, that's enforceable, and that's enduring. If you don't achieve that, then I think you could have a ceasefire for a few months, a few weeks, and then the war will start again and more people will die. That's not the outcome we're interested in. That's not the outcome anyone wants. So that's why this is so difficult.
All right. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, thank you so much for
Marco Rubio, you can't blame a girl for trying, but I just face planted on that gotcha moment. That's Kristen Welker. It got even worse when it turned to CBS with Margaret Brennan and Martha Raddatz. We'll play that for you coming up in just a second. In the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor, and this is The Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone. The screen scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
Barack Obama yucked it up with Vladimir Putin. So did Hillary Clinton for years and years. This was after they had taken Georgia. People forget about that. They took Georgia. Putin took Georgia during the final months of the Bush administration when he was at his weakest point during the election, right before Obama took over. But they forgave that immediately. They didn't treat him like a pariah. No, Hillary Clinton went over there with a reset button. They yucked it up, and everything was fine and everything was gorgeous. Now he needs to be treated like Hitler. Trump comes in and says, I'm going to try to make peace. And he decided that one of the ways to make peace is to give Putin his photo op on Friday in Alaska and then hold his feet to the fire and send a B-2 bomber over his head, by the way, while he did it. And Martha Raddatz on This Week on ABC, very upset about the color of the carpet.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. You don't even pay attention to it anymore. But I will tell you this. Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine. He's already on the world stage. He has the world's largest tactical nuclear arsenal in the world and the second largest strategic nuclear arsenal in the world. He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, oh, it elevates him. Well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin. That's just common sense. I shouldn't even have to say it. So people can say whatever they want. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to get the Russian side to agree to things that they don't want to agree to if we're going to have peace. If not, there'll just be a war. They'll keep killing each other, and life will go on in America and in the rest of the world, but not for Ukraine. So the president has invested a lot of time in trying to bring an end to this war. He deserves credit for doing that. He gets criticism for doing that. He could have just let this war go on. The president could have just said, this is Biden's war. It started under him. We'll do what we can for Ukraine, but we're going to focus on other things. He could have easily said that. But he's the only leader in the world that can get Putin to a meeting to talk about serious things.
That's right. Did you hear that last part? Because Martha Raddatz was trying to talk over him. He's the only leader in the world that got Putin to a meeting to talk about serious things. Period. And if people really care, I know that people are throwing around Nobel Peace Prize. I couldn't care less about the Nobel Peace Prize. Ever since they gave it to Yasser Arafat, a murderous thug terrorist, and then they gave it to Al Gore, a corrupt buffoon, it means nothing. The Nobel, and then they gave it to Barack Obama for literally doing nothing, just for being Barack Obama. The experts in this world, personified by Martha Raddatz, literally have no idea what goes into ending a war and bringing peace. And yet somehow in society, we have elevated these people up to this high platform because they're capable of reading a teleprompter. And we are supposed to care what they think. Good for you, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But I do want to talk about this whole idea of elevating Putin. Who's elevated Putin? Trump's elevating Putin. Trump's empowering Putin. You know who's empowered Putin? You know who's elevated Putin to a level higher than he could have even ever dreamed? Do you know who has empowered Vladimir Putin over the last 10 years beyond his wildest imaginations? I will tell you exactly who and how coming up in a moment. I'll give you a hint. Spoiler alert. Collusion.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
My name is Larry O'Connor. I'm sitting in for Mark Levin. I'm told Mark will be back tomorrow, but if you're missing him, and I'm missing him, you could read On Power, his brand new book, #1 New York Times bestseller, Mark Levin, On Power. What? You don't have a copy? Go buy it. It's fantastic. And buy it for young people in your life so that they can get educated as they go back to school, college, what have you. It's a bit of an inoculator from the left-wing indoctrination they're about to receive. Yeah, we're working on it. It's going to take, it took 50 years for the Department of Education to ruin our public schools and turn them into little woke mills churning out brain-dead zombies who just repeat climate change. Socialism is good. It's going to take a while. We're 6 months into it. Give us a break. So in the meantime, get Mark Levin's book, On Power. While you're at it, if you like the show tonight, and I appreciate it, I do the morning radio show on WMAL in Washington, D.C. You can listen to that live stream or get a podcast. Or also, I do a podcast for Town Hall. You know Town Hall Media. Town Hall, Hot Air, Red State, PJ Media, Twitchy. My buddy and colleague Katie Pavlich, Kurt Schlichter, Derek Hunter, all columnists with me at Town Hall. I do a daily 1-hour live show for them every single day at noon. It's on every video platform you can imagine. And you can also subscribe to that. If you just want the audio, go to Apple, go to Spotify. It's called Larry. The show is called Larry. Yes, the show is called Larry. Easy to remember. We're talking about this question from Martha Raddatz yesterday to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, again, I want to repeat, was magnificent, pushing back on the garbage he has to deal with on these shows. Maureen Brennan was the best. You know, frankly, I don't really care, Margaret, right? That one, Margaret Brennan. We'll play her in a second. But listen to the question again from Martha Raddatz, who I'm told is a really smart, intellectual, serious foreign policy wonk. And again, and like Joe Biden, she's wrong about everything.
Critics of President Trump will say the pomp and circumstance, the red carpet, the warm handshake, that President Trump simply lost that Putin gained there just by being on the world stage and walking down a red carpet with the president. Your reaction to that?
They put him on the world stage and gave him pomp and circumstance. That's a victory for Putin. By the way, even if it is, in the world of diplomacy, sometimes you have to give somebody a victory, even if it's shallow and meaningless. What does it cost us? I'm not even stipulating the fact that it was a victory, but if you think in their terms, if you really play this out, that Putin needed this victory to shore up support at home, and it elevated him, and it made him feel, it helped him save face. So what does it cost us? What does it cost Zelensky? What does it cost Europe? What does it cost the Ukrainians? What does it cost Americans? If we can move this thing along and then have the meeting that we had today with European leaders, say, all right, let's finish this up, and Putin's willing to, start to play ball and actually accept some kind of conversation and trilateral agreements because he's been able to save face a little bit and move the ball down the field because he went and was elevated to the world stage, as Martha Raddatz says, so what? Who cares? Unless you just want to stand on your principles and say, no, he's a monster and we should never even talk to them. And then, okay, you'll stand on your principles, but surrounding where you're standing there will be pools of blood. Because the war continues. And all of these experts like Martha Raddatz, Listen, I'm not as old as I'm about to sound, but I was very young. I was the nerdy kid who actually paid attention to politics and the news and world affairs because I was lucky enough to be a kid when Ronald Reagan was president and giant things were happening in the world. And I was blessed to have a dad who pointed it out to me and said, son, this president is special. And what's going on right now with this president and this Pope, John Paul II, and this Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, we may never see another thing like this again. So I was a kid, and I did pay attention, and I remember vividly the summit between Reagan and Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland, when Reagan got up and walked away. And these same experts, the people like Martha Raddatz, the people like John Kerry, people like Joe Biden at the time, they criticized Ronald Reagan. They criticized Ronald Reagan, and they said Reagan had failed at Reykjavik. And, of course, history proves that if Reagan had given Gorbachev what he wanted at Reykjavik, the Soviet Union would probably still be there today. Reagan walked away, and within a few years, the Berlin Wall fell. And they give credit to Gorbachev. They're always wrong. They're always wrong from a perspective that a strong pro-American, pro-freedom conservative leader is always wrong. It's always that perspective. The pro-freedom, pro-liberty, conservative, pro-strength, pro-American triumphalism has got to be the bad guy. So Reagan had to be wrong. It's the same people. Guys, it's the same people saying the same thing. Now, I'm not saying Trump is Reagan, and I'm not saying this is a Reykjavik moment. What I'm saying is they have not earned your trust. There is no reason why you should take these people seriously. And one other thing, if I may, but real fast. These people I'm talking about, and Joe Biden's the perfect example. Joe Biden and these foreign policy experts in Washington, D.C. that get paid a lot of money and live a really cushy life, drinking really good bourbon out of really nice crystal tumblers. I've seen it. Who are always wrong, who have been wrong for 50 years. These same people criticized Reagan when he walked away from Gorbachev at Reykjavik, and they criticized Reagan when he stood at the Brandenburg Gate in West Germany and proclaimed that Mr. Gorbachev should tear down this wall. Joe Biden, that night, the night that Ronald Reagan proclaimed, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, Joe Biden was on CNN crapping on the president, trashing Ronald Reagan. They never change. Ever. And then Martha Raddatz, with her critics, will say, you know who she means. Critics of the president will say she means herself and her buddies in the newsroom and the producers of ABC's This Week, which I guess also extends to Disney. Still another couple of weeks left in summer vacation. Spend your dollars wisely. Just remember, Disney owns ABC News. Let them know where you're spending your money and where you're not spending your money. Critics will say that the president elevated Vladimir Putin and gave him a victory by standing on a red carpet. They elevated his persona. Let me just pause for a moment here. Vladimir Putin is a thug. You shouldn't believe a word he says. You shouldn't trust him. He's a murderer. He's a criminal. He's a war criminal. He's the aggressor in this war. He's a bad man. He's KGB. He's a snake. And let me tell you something. The greatest thing that ever happened to this petty little KGB thug, spy, this snake, this rat, the best thing that ever happened to Vladimir Putin was Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, Susan Rice, all the criminals from the Obama administration and all their pals in the media, Jake Tapper, George Stephanopoulos, Chuck Todd, all of them. They spent 3 years convincing the entire world that Vladimir Putin was so powerful, so maniacal. His tentacles had such reach and such influence that he upended the American presidency. They pushed a fake narrative, a fiction, a myth, a fairy tale to the people of this country and around the world that Donald Trump was in the White House, positioned to be the most powerful man on the planet, the leader of the free world, but he was really placed there because of the evil machinations of Vladimir Putin. That you talk about elevating Vladimir Putin, you talk about validating Vladimir Putin, you talk about giving Vladimir Putin a gift. That's what those people did. These people elevated Vladimir Putin to heights that he would have never possibly imagined. Because they hated Trump. And they had to rationalize why they were so wrong. They had to give a supportable excuse to why Hillary would lose to such a person. And in turn, they gave Vladimir Putin more propaganda power than he's ever had in his entire life and will ever have in his entire life. There are people to this day who still believe that Vladimir Putin is so powerful that he even placed Donald Trump, a casino owner and reality television star. He plucked him out, groomed him, and placed him in the Oval Office. That's how powerful Vladimir Putin is. And that's all because of your friends on the left. It's all because of people like Martha Raddatz and her boss, George Stephanopoulos, and Disney, and Comcast Universal, which owns NBC News, and Viacom and CBS News, and Discovery Warner and CNN. Yes, name the people in the boardrooms. Name and shame the corporations who do this to you. Who elevated Vladimir Putin? The Democratic Party elevated Vladimir Putin. It was the Democrats the entire time. And their propagandist pals in the media. And now we're supposed to wring our hands because Donald Trump stood next to him on a red carpet? Are you freaking kidding me? Now you're worried about giving Vladimir Putin a PR win? After you convinced the world that he controlled the presidency from the Kremlin? Good Lord. They don't deserve your respect. At all. A little bit more from Martha Raddatz, only because Rubio is so good. I would normally not make your ears bleed by listening to these harpies on the Sunday shows. But Rubio was so good. And this was my favorite one. This is my favorite one, where Martha Raddatz demands to know what was said behind closed doors and what concessions Vladimir Putin has given. Because, yeah, that's exactly what Marco Rubio is going to reveal.
Can you name any concessions that Vladimir Putin made during this meeting? Have any
I wouldn't name him on your program.
Have any concessions
I wouldn't name
been
him
asked?
on your program. Why would I do that?
Where is the
Well,
pressure?
of course, because you can't have a peace agreement. No, you can't have a peace agreement unless both sides give and get. You can't have a peace agreement unless both sides make concessions. That's a fact. That's true in virtually any negotiation. If not, it's just called surrender. And neither side is going to surrender. So both sides are going to have to make concessions. So, of course, concessions were asked. But what utility would there be of me going on a program and tell you we wagged our finger at Putin and told him you must do this and you must do that? It's only going to make it harder and less likely that they're going to agree to these things. So these negotiations, as much as everyone would love it to be a live pay-per-view event, these discussions only work best when they are conducted privately in serious negotiations in which people who have to go back and respond to constituencies because even totalitarian governments have constituencies they have to respond to. People have to go back and defend these agreements that they make.
Good for you, Marco Rubio. Can you name any concessions, Letterman? Why would I tell you? What would be the purpose of telling you that? Marco Rubio, your wife's birthday is coming up. What present have you gotten for her? Tell us now. Secretary Rubio, have you planned a surprise birthday party for your wife? If so, where will it be and at what time? And how will you try to convince her otherwise? What will be the plan so that she does not have any inkling of your surprise birthday party? Tell us right now. The American people demand to know. They're morons. They're absolute morons. And I love that Rubio treats them as such. But the best is Margaret Brennan, Face the Nation. I'll play that for you. Honestly, at this point, Margaret Brennan, on Friday, when she finds out what the show rundown is for Sunday, so who'd you book? Oh, it's Margaret. If it's Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance, don't you think Margaret Brennan's like, oh, I think I'm coming down with something. Hey, no, don't get close. I don't want you to catch anything. Could be COVID. Maybe, malaria. I'm not sure. I have Major Garrett fill in for me. I'm not feeling up to it. This may be the last Margaret Brennan appearance you'll ever hear. We'll play it for you next. It's Larry O'Connor in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
Larry O'Connor sitting in for the great one, Mark Levin. We are reflecting on today's events at the White House, and the best way to reflect on it is to look at what they were saying yesterday. So here's Margaret Brennan, Face the Nation, with Marco Rubio. Listen to how she paints the picture of this again, it's a myth. They don't deal in reality, these people. And here she is painting the picture that you saw. You saw what happened today. Well, according to Margaret Brennan, what you saw today was the Europeans coming to the rescue for Zelensky because Trump was going to bully him into making a peace deal.
You know, there is concern from the Europeans that President Zelensky is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you?
No, it isn't. That's not why they're coming as back. That's not true. No, but that's not that's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're not coming.
That February Oval Office meeting in front of television cameras where President Zelensky.
Do you know how many meetings we've had since then?
Oh no, I know, and I was just up in Alaska watching the one with Vladimir Putin where a red carpet rolled out.
No, but with Zelensky, we've had more meetings. We've had.
They hate this carpet. Should they have done it more like the color of borscht? What would purple have been better? Green, perhaps? I think the only carpet they've got at the Air Force Base is going to be a red one. That's what they use for dignitaries. Doesn't matter. They're fixated on the carpet color. I'm sorry. It drives me insane. All right, I'm going to let you finish. Go ahead.
We've had one meeting with Putin and like a dozen meetings with Zelensky. But that's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're coming here tomorrow because we've been working with the Europeans. We talked to them last week. There were meetings in the UK over the previous weekend.
And they said President Trump was going to demand a ceasefire.
As early as Thursday. No. But you said that they're coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're not coming here tomorrow. Oh, this is such a stupid media narrative that they're coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelensky into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks.
Good for Marco Rubio. Boy, is he rising to the occasion here as Secretary of State. What a stupid media narrative. You people don't know what you're talking about. Listen, coming up, we've got more on what happened today. I want to hear from you at 877-381-3811. And I want to give you a first-hand report on crime in D.C. The numbers are astounding thanks to Trump. Keep it here. I'm Larry O'Connor, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
I'm Larry O'Connor. I'm sitting in for the great one, Mark Levin. Buy his book, On Power, by Mark Levin. It's the #1 New York Times bestseller. And it's a great way when you need your Mark Levin fix. He is back tomorrow, I am told, by the way. Thank you very much. So we're looking forward to him coming back. But what a historic day it was in Washington, D.C. But I'm the morning radio host here in Washington on WMAL, Mark's home radio station here in the nation's capital. And so we kind of get used to everybody paying attention to what's going on in our little neighborhood. But today was special with all the world leaders coming by and what appears to be a breakthrough, hopefully, with regard to some peace in Eastern Europe. And we talked about it quite a bit, and we talked about why, you really, really shouldn't trust the media in any way whatsoever, because they're always wrong. They're always wrong. And one thing they've been wrong about, and something that I've been talking about on my radio show, is crime in Washington, D.C. I've been talking about the crime in Washington, D.C. for over 10 years now, because I've seen the crime get worse and worse and worse. And everyone says, we have a crime problem in Washington. We have a crime problem in D.C., or people have been saying that right up until Donald Trump wanted to do something about it. And then suddenly you heard people say, we don't have a crime problem in D.C. There's no crime problem in D.C. Okay, fine. You want to pretend like there isn't a crime problem in D.C.? That's fine. How about this? Let me rephrase it for you. We have a criminal problem in D.C. We have a major problem with criminals. And we have a major problem with criminals who insist on voting for Democrats so that when they get arrested for their crimes, they're let free and they're not punished. And they're able to get back out on the streets and wreak havoc and commit more crimes. So, yeah, okay, fine. We don't have a crime problem. We have a criminal problem. And last week, a week ago today, President Donald Trump exercised his executive authority over the nation's capital as per the Constitution and statute. And he asserted control over the law enforcement activities under an emergency power, which he has every right to exercise, and thank God that he did. And it's amazing. A week ago, we had reporters for the New York Times saying, this is made up. There's no crime. I see no crime around here. I don't see any crime. What's the problem with crime? And then this week, the same reporters were saying, he's only sending federal law enforcement and National Guards to, the nice neighborhoods or around the monuments. Why doesn't he send it to the black wards and the Southeast D.C. neighborhoods where the crime is? And I'm like, excuse me, I thought you said there was no crime. But of course there's crime. But we've got some number. It's been a week, and we have astounding data here. And I want to flesh this out for a minute, and I would love to hear from you. I know we got a lot of people who are on hold, and I'm sorry, I've had a lot to say. And I will get to your calls. A lot of you want to talk about Putin and Zelensky in the meeting today and Trump. We'll take your calls on that. And if you want to talk, would you like Trump to exercise federal control over your city? I don't think he can, by the way. He can send in certain federal law enforcement agencies to protect federal buildings, right? And there's probably a federal courthouse in the major metropolitan area where you live. But don't you wish all of a sudden that you lived in Washington so that you could get this kind of attention and focus? Because listen here, give us a call at 877-381-3811. The D.C. Police Union woefully understaffed. I think they've got 800 openings or something. Ton of them all lost their jobs because of COVID, because they didn't want to do the mandates. Ton of them left because Black Lives Matter was painted on a street where cops had been beaten up and shoved around and attacked by maniac Antifa BLM activists, terrorists. And the city's response was to reward the terrorists and give them everything. And then cops like, hell, I don't need this. They left. They're cops in the suburbs now. A lot of them went to Florida, took a cushy job down there. They needed more cops down there because of all the people that were fleeing states up here. So they're woefully understaffed. They needed the reinforcement. The D.C. Police Union is thrilled that they have some help and support now. And get this. This is a statement from the police union in the District of Columbia. D.C. crime, since the announcement of federal control versus the 7 days prior, because it's just been a week, right? So you take the crime stats from this last week versus the stats the week before that. Robbery, 46% drop. 46% drop. Carjacking, 83% drop. Car theft, 21% drop. Violent crime, 22% drop. Property crime, 6% drop. All crimes, 8% drop. In 1 week. The new U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. You know her as Judge Janine. I know her now as my U.S. Attorney, Janine Pirro.
Everyone, is Judge Janine filling you in on what's going on in the surge in Washington, D.C. We're at more than 400 arrests over the weekend, 127 this past weekend with our federal partners and this cooperative law enforcement effort. We seized 21 illegal guns. We've made arrests on warrants for homicide, sexual predators, drug trafficking, illegals. If you want to be in D.C. and you're a criminal, you're not welcome.
That says it all. And you know what? Let me tell you something else. I've lived here for going on, I'm in my 14th year now. I don't ever remember seeing the U.S. Attorney giving any statement to criminals saying, get out of here, you're not welcome. I don't remember a U.S. Attorney saying, yeah, we're cracking down and we're going to arrest you and we're going to throw you in jail and we're going to throw away the key. No, the U.S. attorneys under Barack Obama and under Joe Biden, they would make statements about, well, we have to understand the rage that these criminals feel. You know, we're going to set up some new community programs. You can't arrest your way out of this crime problem. You can't. The last thing we want to do is arrest the criminals. We have to feel their pain, give them a little space to, you know, exercise their demons maybe. Blow off a little steam. The fact that she even made a statement on a video like that is phenomenal. In fact, I did a quick search, and I could be wrong. And listen, homicides happen in this town, although it's the hardest stat to fudge. Because you either have a dead body or you don't, right? But I remember the day this was announced, and we had protesters at DuPont Circle. And literally, like 4 blocks away, I think, at Logan Circle, a guy was shot in cold blood in the afternoon on the street. While there were protesters screaming, we don't want Trump, we don't need law enforcement, we're fine, there's no crime crisis. And like 4 blocks away from them, guy got shot. And he died. He was murdered. In the middle of the afternoon. Like blocks away from museums and monuments and the White House. And I did a search earlier today. I believe that was the last murder in Washington, D.C. the day that this announcement was made. So it's 6 days ago, 6.5 days ago. I could, and again, I apologize if I'm wrong, but that was the search that I did, and I checked it on a couple of different, high-powered AI search engines. That was the last murder. So we've gone almost a week now without a murder in D.C., which, by the way, I believe we just hit our 100th murder of the year a week before. So that's averaging well more than 1 murder a week. And people in Washington, D.C. had accepted this as the new normal. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? You know, kids will be kids. Nothing else we can do. And our mayor says there's nothing more we can do, and the district council says there's nothing. Or they blame the Republicans. They blame Trump. So it's working. And he has full authority to do this. Everybody's already litigated that. In fact, we now have the phenomenon of people in this town, in Washington, in certain neighborhoods saying, hey, where's our National Guard? Where's our reinforcements? We want it too. And they're coming. They're coming. And it makes sense that Trump first wanted to secure some of the most high-profile public neighborhoods where there's a lot of tourists and there's a lot of people, because you got to send the signal that we've got safety, you know, and there's priorities. And by the way, I want to reiterate this. This has not happened in a vacuum for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was born in Queens. He is nearly 80 years old. He spent 90% of his life living in New York City. And during a bad time. You know, Trump and I lived in New York at the same time. Actually, I sort of saw the rise of Trump. When I first moved to New York, it was 1986. And that's when he had just finished his project with the Woolman Rink. You've heard this legendary story where the city was trying to get this rink in Central Park, a skating rink, working, and they spent millions of dollars and wasted it and never got anything done. And Trump said, I'll do it. And he did it in like a month. And he did it as a gift to New York. And suddenly you had an ice rink. And then Trump Tower had just been opened a couple of years before, and Trump was sort of on the ascendant. And so but Ed Koch was the mayor. And then Ed Koch was replaced by David Dinkins. And it was bad. It was really bad. People ask me, when will New York have a Republican mayor again? And I think back to the last time they voted for a Republican mayor. It was Rudy Giuliani. And do you know why they voted for a Republican mayor? Because it was bad. It was really, really bad. And so my answer is the same when they say, when will we have a governor? Because I've lived in Los Angeles and in California for most of my life. I tend to go where the liberals are in charge. And they, you know, when will we have a Republican mayor of L.A.? When will we have a Republican governor of California? And it's like, you know, in the 90s, in the glorious 1990s, can we call them the gay 90s? That is a different connotation now. I guess we can't. You had a Republican governor of New York in George Pataki. You had a Republican mayor of New York City in Rudy Giuliani. You had a Republican governor of California, Pete Wilson. And you had a Republican mayor of Los Angeles, Dick Reardon. And things were great. I am telling you, as a person who was bi-coastal, working for a New York-based company in Manhattan as their representative in Los Angeles, I was flying back and forth between Manhattan and L.A. a lot. And it was the best time to be in both of those places. And it was because things had gotten so bad in those cities and in those states, they were so desperate they turned to a Republican. And it got fixed pretty quickly. And Donald Trump witnessed that. He saw how bad it was, and he saw Giuliani within 2 years turn New York City around. And guess what? Part of it, Trump's doing the same thing in D.C. You know what Giuliani's first focus was when he became mayor? In terms of cleaning up the streets, getting rid of the homeless, getting rid of the drug dealers, getting rid of the vagrants, getting rid of the hustlers, getting rid of the prostitutes. It was Times Square. He focused on Times Square, and he cleaned up Times Square, and it sent a message to the world that law and order was back, and they cared, and it was safe, and the tourists were welcome. And so what is Trump doing in D.C.? He starts with the monuments. He starts with the mall. He starts where the museums are, and it sends a message. And look, it's working. In just 1 week, it's working. But the liberals in D.C., mostly affluent, protected white liberals in politics or the media, they hate it. I'm going to share some of their thoughts, and I want to hear from you about Putin, about Zelensky, about what Trump is doing in D.C., and whether you think it'll work in your city. I want to hear from you. 877-381-3811. I'm Larry O'Connor, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
Larry O'Connor in for Mark Levin, a local television station here in D.C., the ABC affiliate, Channel 7. They have a man on the street, and the banner under the bottom part of the screen says, Federal Takeover. Federal take. I love the... What's wrong with this? You all attend the 3 hour a day, 15 hours a week, Mark Levin constitutional class here on the Mark Levin Show. I'm a fellow student, Larry O'Connor, sitting in for Mark Levin. Here's a quick pop quiz for all of the students there in Mark Levin's constitutional class. When Donald Trump asserted his executive privilege and rights over the District of Columbia by instituting cooperation between federal law enforcement and the local police department and exercising his rights, claiming a crisis in crime from the Home Rule statute. Would you call that a federal takeover? Let me ask the question another way. If the District of Columbia is in fact a federal district under the constitutional control of the federal government headed by the chief executive of that federal government, the President of the United States, aren't they already over the District of Columbia? Don't they already have a certain level of control? Did you know that every law that gets passed through the district council in Washington and signed by the mayor is not a law until Congress approves it? Did you know that Congress has the right to reject any law passed by the district council and signed in by the mayor? That is true. Would that be a federal takeover? No. It's the federal government exercising the actual constitutional powers that were given to them by the founding fathers in the Constitution on day one. Federal takeover. That said, I love this. When they go to crime-ridden neighborhoods, when they talk to, I've seen so many men on the street interviews with D.C. residents of color. They all say, I hate the crime. I hate that it got this way. If Trump can help, great. Bring on the help. But when they go to a white liberal who works in D.C. for the government, you always hear this kind of thing. Listen to this.
Yeah, you have young people who rob CVS's, and yeah, you have young people who will go and take down a 7-Eleven. But the answer isn't pouring the National Guard in here. The answer is programs that raise kids up.
Yeah. Sure, you got kids who rob a CVS and take down a 7-Eleven, but you don't bring in the National Guard yet. You get taxpayer-funded programs to raise them up because that's been working well.
This is the show the New York Times is afraid of. Mark Levin. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
Larry O'Connor sitting in for the great one, Mark Levin. I want to take your calls now here in this last 30 minutes. Are y'all doing the head bop right now, like Night at the Roxbury? I know I am. That's what you got to do. You got to do that thing with the head bop because I talked about the 90s. Hey, follow me on social media, Larry O'Connor, LarryOconnor. Yes, there's an apostrophe, but social media hates that sort of thing. I got a podcast from Town Hall every day at noon live. You can catch it on all the video platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you want. Just look for Larry and Town Hall. And I do the morning show on WMAL in Washington, D.C. If you need a new morning show, streaming live. 5 to 9 a.m. every single day. It's called O'Connor and Company. And finally, I have a book out. It's called Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. It's all about the lies of the 2024 presidential election. I name names. I show you all the examples. But then it's got a happy ending because they're irrelevant. He defeated George Stephanopoulos. He defeated 60 Minutes. He defeated Biden. He defeated Kamala. And we've got a new media world we're living in. It's one that my mentor, Andrew Breitbart, only dreamed of. But he saw it. It was a vision, and we're living in it now. And it's where we take back the media. We take back the First Amendment. We take back freedom of the press. It's our right, by the way. That's our First Amendment. Freedom of the press doesn't belong to Jim Acosta and Don Lemon. It belongs to us. That's why we have freedom of the press. It's for us. And we own it. All right, let's take your calls at 877-381-3811. I want to start with John from Troy, New York. Hey, John, I hear you're a retired cop. Thank you for your service. What do you think of what you're seeing right now in our cities?
Okay, well, thanks for taking the call. I am dying for federal takeover in upstate New York. We have to look at the areas that the federal presence has come into Washington. That's sacred ground, and by suiting up and protecting those areas, what they've done is they've allowed Washington, D.C. PD to spread out and get to the neighborhoods that so badly need police attention.
Yeah.
Troy's a great example. We have a downtown going through Renaissance. We have all our uniforms there. We have all our cars there. But to be very frank and respectful, our black and Hispanic neighborhoods are unprotected. And there's a gangster presence there that will not go away because we can't change that. So, credit to the president, 3 cheers, because Washington is much safer now. And a lot of people are going to feel much better about going down there and doing what they need to do, which is see our national treasures.
Yeah, well, and by the way, petition your representative. That's the other reason why this is critically important and why the founders didn't want this to be a city in some other state or a state of its own, because every single American citizen, we live in a representative, a constitutional republic. You have a representative that you elected with through democratic means. And if you want to petition your government and talk to your representative, you come to Washington, D.C. and do that. And you shouldn't have to be looking over your shoulder to see if you're going to get knifed in the back while you do it.
And I will tell you, the liberal presence in our government, when it goes that way with a city like Troy, it just makes you fear more than ever. And then when we have the other side come in, law enforcement gets a little bit more priority, a lot more priority. So I'm thrilled about the federal takeover, which is ridiculous. And in a sense, I'm much more looking forward to Washington, D.C.
Thanks, John. Thanks for your service as a cop and a first responder. It's a thankless life, and we appreciate it, and to your family. Yeah, it's not a federal takeover. It's a federal reassertion of their basic rights in oversight of the federal government. And, yes, we finally have a guy who cares about it. It's not like crime was good under previous presidents. They just shrugged and said, yeah, not my problem. I got enough to deal with. Trump doesn't like it. He doesn't like that the city is ugly. He doesn't like that there's criminal vagrants living in the streets right outside the White House. He thinks it looks bad. It does look bad. He knows it looks bad. And it matters. It makes a difference. I also love people were saying, well, a lot of this is just, they show a video of National Guardsmen walking on the metro platform where the subways are, which, by the way, is exactly what Kathy Hochul did in Johns, New York. Kathy Hochul last year called in the National Guard to police the subways because crime was so bad in the subways. And she was championed as a hero. Oh, Kathy Hochul is tough on crime. She's gone to the National Guard on the subways. But Trump does the exact same thing, and he's a joke. He's a clown. He's an authoritarian. He's a dictator. They're goose-stepping. It's a takeover. He's sending in the troops. And I saw one commentator in D.C. today say, well, these National Guardsmen on the platform at the metro station in D.C., which, can be a dicey place to be, sadly. It didn't used to be, but it is now. Thanks to the local politicians who decided to go several years. They wanted to decriminalize fare jumping. So you had to pay your fare, but they announced to the world that if you didn't pay your fare, they wouldn't arrest you, and they wouldn't give you a fine, and there would be no punishment. So explain to me why, this guy is Kami Mamdani up in New York City. He wants to do this. He keeps saying free buses for everybody. Free. That's the thing is free. Someone's paying for the bus. Someone's paying for the maintenance on the bus. Someone's paying the guy to drive the bus. Someone's paying to clean the bus. So it's not free. You're paying for it, New York. You're going to pay for it. But if you've ever been to New York, you have a good idea of the problems in New York with the criminal element, with the vagrant element, right? You suddenly say buses are now free. There's no fare on our buses. Those things will be rolling homeless shelters. That's all they'll be. How are you going to kick somebody off of the bus? They're going to go in there with their sleeping bag and their little box of stinky things, and they'll never leave. They'll just keep riding the bus all day, especially in the winter. Especially in the summer, it's air conditioned. Hey, is this your stop? No, man, just keep going. And go all the way to Staten Island, man. Staten Island's an island, hence the name. We won't be going there. I don't care, man. I just keep rolling. I just got to sleep one off, man. So they're looking at these National Guardsmen walking on the metro platform in D.C. today. And they say, well, there doesn't seem to be any crime there. It really is nothing more than a show. First of all, there's no crime there because the National Guardsmen are on the platform. It's like, I'm shocked. The National Guardsmen are there, yet I see nobody mugging anyone. I see no one threatening anyone with a weapon. No women are being harassed by thugs. So why do we need the National Guardsmen there? Idiots. It's not happening because they're there. But them to follow it and say, it looks like nothing more than a show. Yeah, it's funny. It's called a show of force. That's the point. All of these people in the media who report on this, they all live behind some sort of gate, I assure you, in D.C. And the gate has cameras on it. And I assure you it has a sign, if not their own home, then in the neighborhood they live in which they live. I'm going to dangle a participle on you. And all of those neighborhoods or their own home with the gate will have a sign that says, warning, this property under surveillance, no trespassing. Guard dog, and you'd walk by, it's like, gee, that sign, it just seems to be nothing but a show. The sign's not doing anything. Why do you have the sign? And it's to let the bad guys know, don't even think about it. And that's why the guardsmen are there. And that's why the other federal law enforcement are engaging in D.C. And it's called policing. And here's what's great about this. The other thing that I love about what Trump is doing in D.C. and how every logical, normal thinking American witnesses this and reaches the same conclusion, which is, well, yeah, duh. Yes, that's how you prevent crime. Yes, that's how you secure a crime-infested city. You make sure there are a lot of cops. You make sure they're visible. You make sure they're present. And they're empowered to enforce the law. And if you're out of line, you're arrested, and they throw the book at you. And my favorite part about that, and the reason that we all say duh, is because these are basic norms of Western civilization that we've known for a couple of centuries now. Things like you don't let people live on the streets and the sidewalks in a box or a tent, defecating and urinating all over the place, because that's a public health hazard. We learned that like hundreds of years ago. Our original colonies had laws against that. And yet in the last 20 years, thanks to, brilliant intellectuals like Barack Obama, we have to rethink policing. We have to reimagine public safety. Do we? Well, here are the fruits, and from the fruits you shall know them. How about Sam in Kansas City on the mighty KCMO? Sam, thanks for listening. I'm Larry O'Connor, in for the great one.
Hi, Larry. Mark has the best guest host.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Ben Ferguson is a stud. I will agree with that. I love that guy.
Him too, and Brian Mudd, all those guys that were in while he was in Israel, yes. All right. Let's see. Do you got Mark's book? What do you think of it?
I love On Power. I'm just finishing it the second time through. How about you?
I'm about to start my third time through. I think it's the best political treatise.
Right. It is. It's fantastic. You know what else I love about it, Sam, is that whatever's going on in the news, you can go to a specific chapter that sort of covers exactly the sort of narrative that you're watching right now play out.
Yes.
And you can sort of drill down and read about 8 pages in, and you're already better informed than most of the teleprompter readers you see on cable.
So let's see. I'll hit my main point first, and then a smaller point that goes to what you were talking about when I got on the phone was about my mom, Donnie. What we saw Friday from President Trump in Alaska was an exercise and masterclass in statesmanship. And we haven't seen a statesman like this since Reagan. And all I remember of Reagan, of course, I was little, like 3 years old. Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall on the news.
Yeah. No, which, of course, the left all said was, is going to lead us to World War III, and it actually ended the Cold War. But so you think it was a masterclass in statesmanship?
Yes, it was.
What Trump did, yeah. So you're not bothered by the red carpet?
No.
Yeah, all right. Good to know.
As usual, the left misses the point entirely and gets fixated on something material.
Yeah.
And then Marco Rubio was an absolute beast against Martha Raddatz and that other moron.
Yeah, all of them.
It's like they want to play this gotcha. They want to play this gotcha game that goes along with their narrative, and neither Rubio, President Trump, or Vance, or Ramaswamy are dumb enough to fall into it because they know it's coming. They can see it a mile away. And then my smaller point about Mamdani is like he wants the city to run a chain of grocery stores in one of the most complex logistical nightmares of a city in the country with a dense urban development and population. Yeah, that's not going to work out.
That is not going to work out. By the way, thank you. All great observations, Sam, and thank you for the kind words as well. We appreciate it. Yeah, this whole idea of him taking over. By the way, if you drill down, first of all, I think he's already admitted it, or if he hasn't admitted it, it's already been revealed that the entire premise of the budget he's going to borrow that's currently allocated from the city budget for these city-owned grocery stores, it's a myth. The city doesn't have this money. He misread the city's budget. Eric Adams, the mayor, pointed this out. The money doesn't exist. Doesn't matter. He's a communist. They find the money. They take it from you, right? Number one. Number two, this whole idea that it's going to be what I think he said it was going to be $80 million for 5 grocery stores for 5 years, and there's going to be one in each borough. One in the Bronx, one in the Queens, one in Brooklyn, one in Staten Island, one in Manhattan. So you think that's going to make any difference at all? One grocery store in all of Manhattan run by the government, and that's going to be the game changer? None of it means anything. It's all talking points and symbolism that amount to nothing but ceding your power to a bully. And he's leading in the polls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Larry O'Connor, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
Larry O'Connor in for the great one, Mark Levin. Thank you for listening tonight, by the way, and please find my podcast, subscribe, listen. It's live every day at noon, by the way, on all video platforms. Do it for Town Hall Media. And buy my book, Shameless Liars. I've got some breaking news for you. This just developed during the show. I was trying to get more details on it. Andrew Bailey, the Attorney General of Missouri, has tendered his resignation so he can now take on the federal role as co-deputy director of the FBI. I've never heard of a co-deputy director, but as you know, Dan Bongino is the deputy director of the FBI, and there was a bit of a dust-up several weeks ago over the media rollout of the Epstein matter, as you know, and it was reported and never denied that Mr. Bongino had threatened to quit if Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, wasn't fired. President Trump, within 24 hours, came out with a strong voice of support for Bondi, as did the FBI Director Kash Patel. By the time we got to Monday, after that Friday news story with Bongino, the president said, Dan's fine. And he has continued in his job. He has not walked off the job. And now the latest development is we will have a co-deputy director. Both Mr. Bongino and Andrew Bailey. For those of you who don't know, Andrew Bailey has been a very effective attorney general for the state of Missouri. He initiated a lawsuit against China over COVID-19, and as unlikely as it may be that it ever actually ends up getting into court and pursuing any actual damages, I think they're suing for billions and billions of dollars for the damages caused by COVID-19. What it did do was raise to the level of the judicial system and collection of evidence backup that proved the origins of COVID-19, and it actually forced that story ahead. Where was our president? Where was Joe Biden suing China over COVID-19? Where was our Fed? They were trying to sweep everything under the rug, and Bailey led the charge on that, and it was incredibly effective. by the way, in terms of just driving that narrative. He's also been a huge proponent of secure borders and immigration policies. He actually sued the Biden administration over their open borders, along with other attorneys general. And that was also, he also joined in lawsuits against social media companies. In fact, I think he led the first legal actions against social media companies for not just for their censorship and their totalitarian tactics, but his case alleged that social media contributes to the mental health issues among young people and engage in deceptive practices, the mind control and manipulation of children. He's been a very strong and active attorney general. He is now officially the deputy. There's no confirmation process for this job, by the way. He can start tomorrow. So now you've got two deputy directors of the FBI, a very interesting development as the team continues to be shuffled and reassembled. You're up to speed. Thank you for listening. Mark's back tomorrow. Again, find me on all social media platforms. Would love for you to watch my live show and download and subscribe to the podcast and check out my book, Shameless Liars. My name's Larry O'Connor.